like maybe before we even get into this match, we should probably explain because not everybody is into the whole history.
Right, like
You
of the
know,
territories.
right. This was the time that, and this is why originally I wanted to do Bob Backlund losing the title to the Iron Sheik, but we could not. That match was not in the vote, which I don't understand why. And you know why I wanted to do that match? A, because Bob Backlund's on TV right now. And you know the younger people that don't know who Bob Backlund really was, it's interesting to see his path. I mean, he was a WWF, three W's, for five or 6 years, was it? Something
I'm
like
not
that.
sure. I am really not sure. Like,
I believe it wasn't as long as Bruno. Okay, so
no. Well,
Bruno
really,
was your first. Bruno was your first baby face, right? Your first main baby face champion was Bruno. Bruno loses the title to Billy Graham. Yeah, was it Billy
yeah.
Graham? Okay, so he loses the title to Billy Graham. Now, Billy Graham is your first heel, basically transitional champion. Because even though Billy Graham's reign lasted like a year, Billy Graham was the heel, like pretty much I believe he was the first heel champion. You know, back in those days, your baby faces held the titles for years, right? Bruno had two long runs. He had the two long runs. The one was the 10-year run, and I think he had like a 6 or 7 year run. I could be wrong with the amount of years, peoples. You had a long run with Bruno. Then you had Billy Graham being your transitional champion. Then Bruno gets it back, and then eventually, I don't know if Billy Graham win it a second time or if there was another heel in between them. But then Bob Backlund is your second real baby face. You know, your baby face, your Hulk Hogan, your John Cena, your number one guy, right? Is Bob
Right.
Backlund. Bob Backlund's gimmick was All American Boy. Now he's crazy old man, but before he was All American Boy, and like he held that title for a long time. And an interesting thing I wanted to bring up on the podcast, Rich, which I don't think I told you because I know you don't follow the history as much, but it was planned out that Billy Graham, and I saw this on a it was a kayfabe commentary shoot video,
Okay.
and it was the one with Billy Graham. I think it was like they reviewed like 1978 or something like that, right? And this is a time that Backlund, I guess this was before Backlund won the championship. I don't remember. I don't. That's not the important part. What's important was Billy Graham was explaining that, hey, you're going to take the title from Bruno at this time, you know, and then a year and a half later, at this time, you're going to lose this title to Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund will be your next babyface champion. So basically, Vince Sr. was already planning out how they were going to transition from Bruno to Bob Backlund.
And actually, before we get too carried away here, Bruno, this was the second time that he had the belt whenever Billy Graham got it from him.
Exactly.
The first time that he had it was in 1963, and he lost it in 1971.
1971, yeah. So he had it for 8 years. That was
Right.
the big, long run. But who did he lose it to the first time?
Ivan
That's what I was
Koloff.
trying to... Oh, it was Ivan Koloff.
Right, and he only had it for 21 days.
Exactly.
That
so
is
actually,
the first transitional guy.
Right.
Well,
That's
actually,
the
it's
first.
not. You could almost call Buddy Rogers the first transitional champion, and he was the first champion. He only had the belt for 22 days.
Yeah, but he was a baby face, and his situation was different because was Buddy Rogers was a baby face, right? Nature Boy.
I'm not positive. I believe that he was from the matches I've seen him in.
I think something happened to where he was like, because that was back when it was NWA. You know what I mean? Like that was a different time altogether. Vince didn't really. I believe I really got to go into the history that far back, but I believe that was a situation where things were planned out between more than one person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where it was so it's hard to really. I really don't have the answer to that one, 100%. But since the point that we're trying to make, peoples, is back in those days you had a long babyface champion for years, not months, not weeks. I mean, yeah, you hear about a 21 title range, but that was the transitional champions that would have people. You know, you would lose the title if you were a number one guy, if you were the guy, if you were the keeper of the company, if you had the brass ring, if you were the well, I don't know what do they call him, the guy. If you were the guy, if we want to talk Roman Reigns right now, I'm the guy. So the guy was Bruno Sammartino, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next guy, Backlund. In between Bruno's two reigns was Ivan Koloff. And if I remember correctly, the reason why Ivan Koloff even won that title originally was Bruno wanted time off. It wasn't even a situation. In fact, now I remember Bruno wanted time off, and they needed a different champion. And
Actually, actually, between Backlund and Backlund, it was Antonio Inaki.
but that's not recognized. That's not recognized.
Right, like
That
that was like
is
a 6-day thing, and then after that, it was
that,
vacated.
that yeah, exactly. That's I was going to get into that, but that is actually a non-recognized title. Believe it or not, even though Antonio Inoki did win it, it's still not recognized if you go to the record books. Why that is, I'm not really sure. It would be something that would be kind of cool to ask, like your Dave Meltzers or somebody like that. You know, like someone that's really in the business that could give us these types of answers. I think I did hear the story once, but it was just a
Well,
while
well,
ago, and
what
I
it
can't.
was he won it. Like that was like that weird time, like whenever they were trying stuff out in Japan, if I remember correctly, and he got it
What year
there.
was that Inoki had it? That was '70s, right?
Yeah, it was like 79. It was late
Right. So
79. So yeah, like I want to say like he won it like in Japan or something, and then they were like, yeah, whatever.
he had it for like a week, didn't he?
Yeah, 6 days.
6 days. Yeah. So, but again, back we keep falling off the point. The point is, you had a long babyface champion. You had a heel transitional champion. Now this time, I wanted to do the Bob Backlund thing because the whole reason why I wanted to do it was Vince Jr. Bob Backlund was a Vince Senior guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Vince Jr. didn't really like Bob Backlund. You just didn't really like him. So I always thought that was kind of funny how like you know, just how the different Vince Jr. was taking over. You know what I mean? His guy was going to be Hogan. That was what he saw. He saw in AWA. He he took Hogan away basically from Vern Gagne. You can go back and research that if you really want to get into all that. But the point is, Hogan. Now remember, Hogan also did work for Vince's dad in the WWF
Right.
even before this time. But then Hogan did Rocky 3. Vince McMahon Jr. saw the smartness in adding celebrities, as we know throughout history with WrestleManias and everything else, rock and roll wrestling. He wanted to use celebrities. Vince Sr. did not, which is why they didn't end up getting Andy Kaufman, which is why Memphis got Andy Kaufman for Jerry Lawler. Originally, Andy Kaufman tried to go to Vince Sr. If
Right.
you, I don't know if you knew that or not, but basically, Vince Sr. fires Hogan because Hogan did Rocky 3, and Vince Sr. didn't want nothing to do with that, right? Back in
Mm-hmm.
those days, wrestling was wrestling, and that was it. You know what I mean? You're giving away the business, which is what Vince basically did. So they had different philosophies, but the point is, Hogan or Vince Jr. was taking over at this time. Backlund, Backlund's time was ending anyway. We're in the 80s at this point. Backlund is Backlund, Yes, he did come back in '94 for a real short run with the title, but that was more or less he was the transitional champion back then. You
Right.
know, at this time, Hogan is going to be the guy that is going to take over, and we know what ended up happening with Hogan. What he ended up becoming. And God bless him for what he did end up becoming because he is the reason why wrestling, became what it was. Even though he's kind of a weirdo now and he's racist and everything else, whatever. But back then, this was going to be their guy, the actor from Rocky 3, the guy that had the look. To the young kids, this was John Cena before John Cena. To the older people, this is Hulk Hogan. You know,
Right. And this is also something kind of interesting to note. Bob Backlund, last time he had the belt was in '79. He lost it to the Iron Sheik. Bob Backlund had it for 1,470 days.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan, on the other hand, had it for 1,474 days.
Well, yeah, it's the old. We want to break his record.
Right. Well, that's not even a record to break because Bruno still has it.
Exactly. But maybe it was a WWF thing as compared to a WWF thing. Just like how they use with the tag teams today, how New Day is the longest running tag team, blah 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 crap. But really, it's who is it? God, Demolition. Demolition's
Well,
the real.
oddly, the belt that we have right now, the belt that Dean Ambrose has, is the exact same title as Buddy Rogers in 1963.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought Ambrose had a WWE looking title.
Yeah, it's the WWE looking one, but it's the same title.
I'll have to give that a look. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the WWE World Championship.
I'll have to give it.
And what they did was they pretty much combined, from what it looks like, is they combined the World Heavyweight title.
Right.
In with this.
I'll have to do the comparison.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at it right now. Okay, right. So on January 23rd, 1984, this old school match, it was actually filmed for Madison Square Garden television. I don't really know the name of the channel.
Before you get into the actual match, there's one other thing I wanted you to talk about before you get into the actual match.
Okay.
Explain the Iron Sheik. Because this is the transitional guy. This is what I was trying to build up to. This is the transitional guy who took it from Backlund, only to lose it a month later to Hogan. This is your first. Now, this is an Olympian, right?
Right.
Now, you guys probably know that Iron Sheik is the crazy old man who curses everybody out and everything. Before that, before he was a junkie, before he was a disaster, he was an Olympian. Was he a gold medalist? I think he was a gold medalist. He was also Mr. What is it? The weight, Mr. Universe or whatever. He was one of them. He hung out with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and all them. Like the Iron Sheik was a very famous Olympian. Like this guy, and he is from Iran. He was today would be Rusev would have this gimmick. But he was basically your heel from a different country, your foreign heel back then.
Right.
Now he's like a funny guy, and he barely can move, and people he makes you laugh basically. But back then he was very hated. To give him the title, to lose to Hogan, just to give him that title for those 3 weeks, people were flipping their lids off, brother.
Yeah. Well, actually, he pretty much had it for the month of February. He had it for 28 days.
Right.
From December to January. Now, the one thing I find interesting about Iron Sheik was his finishing move was the Cobra Clutch.
Of course.
And what's interesting to me about that is whenever I think of Cobra Clutch, I really don't think of Iron Sheik, but I think of Sergeant Slaughter.
Well, now, you remember when Sergeant Slaughter was basically supposed to be a nemesis of Iron Sheik. You know what I mean? You remember they had their feuds, and then remember when Slaughter turned heel.
Oh, yeah, he became the Iraq sympathizer.
Exactly, and he was with the Iron Sheik at that time. Right. And this is when America was at war with Iraq the first time.
Right, and what's also interesting about this is Iron Sheik actually disowned Iran during this period. I'm pretty sure that was all just part of the work or whatever.
Yeah.
He came back as I can't remember his name. No, Colonel Mustafa.
Yeah. Which is stupid. You can't switch up the Iron Sheik. I'm sorry, you just can't.
It worked, I think. But keep in mind, whenever that happened, I was a little kid. Yeah, I don't know. So, anyway, to get back to this match, before we get back off topic, because that's going to happen.
I had to give the history of the Sheik so people would understand, like...
Right.
Again, with the same deal with Bob Backlund. When a young person sees Bob Backlund today, they're not going to realize he was your second main number one baby face, He was a Hulk Hogan before Hulk Hogan. He was John Cena before Hulk Hogan. He was he was the second Bruno. You know what I mean? Like he was your babyface number one. He was the guy. You know. So and Iron Sheik. You know they recycle these gimmicks in wrestling. You know Rusev basically has the Iron Sheik's old gimmick.